recording it, you can. So the first thing on your drawing boards that I would suggest that you do is, if it's not your drawing board that's brand new, what I would do is put another piece of drawing paper behind yours, because that way a lot of these drawing boards have tape and scratches and paint and stuff on them. So if you just put your paper on it directly and then you start rubbing with charcoal, it's going to pick up that texture and it may not go away in your drawing. So I would suggest, like, try to clean your drawing board off, but also you may want a secondary piece of paper under it just to work as like an additional cushion for your drawing, okay? Another thing, if it's not your drawing board and you don't know if you're going to be able to finish the drawing today, I wouldn't tape it directly to the board. You might tape it and then wrap the tape around the edges so that you can take the drawing home, but you don't have to take the edges, because you don't want to take the tape off of your drawing until you're completely finished and after you've sprayed it, okay? Sometimes students will take the tape off and then go to spray it, and then the edges get all dirty, and that defeats the whole purpose of taping it off to begin with, okay? So I'd ask you guys to get blue tape. This is green, I know, so it's a little different, but this is a tape called frog tape, and it's a little more expensive. That's why I didn't ask you guys to get it, bless you, because you really don't need it. The blue painter's tape works really well. If you ever have just like the regular masking tape, like I have over here, this will tear your drawings, and even the blue tape and this tape will dry after several days, so it could tear your paper as well. But this is really bad, so it's kind of ironic because the painter's tape works best with drawing and regular masking tape works better for canvases because it sticks better. The blue tape doesn't always want to stick to canvases. So when they call it painter's tape, it's more for walls, you know. So, but if you ever have just this tape and you're like want to use it, but you're scared that it's going to tear your drawings, you can take it on your pants and just go like this, and it lifts up the lint from your jeans, and it will make it where it's not as sticky. So that's one little trick, you're welcome, that you could use. But anyway, so if you have this easy release tape, what you want to do is go around and tape the edges. And this is where some people may be better at this than others. Again, if it's your drawing board, you can tape directly to it. And but you want to just overlap about 1/4 of an inch, okay? So that's pretty small. You know, it's only like this big, you know, so be very careful, because sometimes I have students and like they taped off like half the paper, or it's like diagonal. So you can usually, do you see how you can see the tape under the paper underneath the tape? So just kind of eyeball it before you stick it down, and if you need help, you know, ask me or another classmate. But what this is going to do is it's going to free up your paper, because some of you probably had your clamps on and you couldn't see, and you would have to move them around to carry the drawing off the edge. So this is going to help. This is going to help with that. So I'm going to do the top as well. And the tape's kind of forgiving, so if it's not perfectly straight, you should be able to kind of lift it up and move it around. And again, if it's not your drawing board, you'll want to fold the tape around to the back so that you can take it home that way. And whenever you guys get ready, when you finish the drawing and you've sprayed it, whenever you get ready to take the tape off, come see me if you're scared, because if you pull the tape, sometimes students just want to go and like lift the tape up really fast, and it will tear your whole paper across. So the best way to take the tape off is to do it parallel to your drawing. So if you lift up an edge like this and then pull away from the drawing and keep it flat, then it will come off really easy, and if it does tear, it will tear away from the drawing, not across the drawing, okay? So be very careful, and if you want me to take it off, I'll be happy to. I have OCD and I love picking at things. So taking tape off of stuff, like I like doing that kind of thing. So I'm happy to do that for you. Did you have a question?
Oh, what you can also do so it doesn't make the paper is use a hairdryer, like so it warms up the glue.
Oh, okay. That's a good idea.
And it lessens the chance of it ripping the paper.
All right, so once you do all 4 edges, it shouldn't take that long. Then you're gonna take your vine charcoal or your willow charcoal, And this is why I told you guys you were gonna need a lot of this. And can somebody get me a paper towel, please? I'm sorry, I forgot to grab one. So you're gonna take your willow charcoal, and this is where you may use several sticks. It's kind of fun too, because you get to get some of your aggression out. So what I want you to do is just literally scribble across the surface of the paper, okay? Thank you. So to me, it's fun if you've had to sit in traffic or answer emails, or you're coming from algebra, whatever. It's kind of fun to just kind of scribble all over your paper. Now, it is best to do this with the larger, thicker sticks of vine charcoal, because you can see that it keeps breaking. So that's why I was telling you might want to have a variety pack. If you go to that store I told you about called Azel, you can actually get a piece of vine charcoal that's like this big around. And I mean, it looks like a hot dog, and it's just a big burnt stick. So that makes it super easy. Another thing you can do is if it keeps breaking, you could get a piece of sandpaper like this, and instead of drawing all over it, you can grind it down kind of like people do with like nutmeg and cinnamon on like coffee fancy drinks and stuff like that. It's kind of fun, but this takes a little bit longer. And once you get it all over, then you're gonna take a paper towel, and you have some right over by the sink, and really lightly, so I'm not gonna press down hard at all, because you don't wanna smush the tooth or texture of the paper, but in just a really light circular motion, I'm gonna start to just move the charcoal around. All right, but not too hard that I'm like flattening the paper or smoothing it out too much. Now, you're gonna have to do it a few times probably, unless you have like really thick vine charcoal. So you'll probably have to come back and do another layer. And what we're wanting is somewhere between these two, so a middle gray value, okay? Now you can do this with the compressed charcoal as well, but remember how dark that is, so it kind of defeats the purpose, and it's also really hard to erase. So I recommend just always doing it with the vine or willow charcoal, so that you have a middle gray to work with. All right, so I'm gonna rub this in. Again, just really light. I'm not pressing down it hard, very hard, because I really don't want to lift the charcoal up or smooth out the surface of the paper too much. And you want to do this flat, so I would make your tables flat or do it on the seat or the floor, so that, because if you do it at an angle, it's just gonna all get all over the place, okay? So this looks pretty good. Sometimes, like if you have really hard charcoal, you can see some of these scratches, and that's kind of hard to avoid, but once you draw, they kind of start to disappear, and they kind of look like a filter, like that you would put on a photo that makes it look kind of old or something. So they don't bother me, but if it bothers you, you may want to get a piece of sandpaper and grind it down and rub it in, and that will keep it from getting those marks on there. So once you get it to a medium tone, you can see that it's kind of in between those two bottom grays. Then you can just take it and kind of hit it on the ground to get the excess charcoal off. And then what I want you to do is, looking at the still life, you're going to take another piece of the willow charcoal, and you're just gonna start drawing the composition you want. And just like the rules that I told you last week, try to draw fast. Keep in mind those gesture exercises that we did where we worked really quick. I don't want to walk around an hour after we start this and you guys not have anything down. So don't go back to your old ways of being scared and timid and taking your time. Like, do a quick gesture. Like this is, I see that the seashell is like kind of in this area. I see the box is here. So don't be afraid to really sketch it out and work really quick and just get the gesture on there where everything goes. Then you'll be able to go back in and work. And let's say you're starting to draw and you're like, oh man, that doesn't look good. Well, that's what's so cool about this technique is you take the paper towel and you can just rub it right back in and start all over again. So it's super, super forgiving, and you don't ever have to like start over, okay? So I don't know if you guys ever played with the Etch-a-Sketch. I asked a student yesterday and she looked at me like that was some old fossil tool or something. But an Etch-a-Sketch was like a thing you could turn these knobs and draw with, and when you didn't like it, you could shake it and it would go away. And so that's what this reminds me of, is because it's so forgiving and you can just keep drawing and drawing. But what I want you to do is sketch out your composition. Like I said, you can zoom in, you can use the viewfinders that we have, you can use your hands, but I want you to draw the objects larger than they are, like you see in my examples, so that you have plenty of room to work with. Then you're gonna come back in with your erasers, and you will start to lift up the highlights, okay? So instead of putting in the dark values, which is normally what we are told to do, or what we think that we're supposed to do, what I want you to do is start erasing the highlights that you see. So I can't turn down the lights, or you won't be able to see what I'm doing right now. But what I would do is just start coming in, and where I see highlights, do you see how it's erasing those highlights? And so I can start coming in, and wherever I see highlights, I can start just lifting up the charcoal there, okay? Then once I get all the highlights lifted, and people are scared to do this because it feels backwards, well, that we call this subtractive or reductive drawing. So it is kind of like working backwards. It's a lot like painting, because you're blocking in like highlights and shadows. And that's what makes it, to me, really cool and exciting, is because you can get a lot done really quickly. But as you start to lift up the highlights, then you can start coming back in with more willow or vine charcoal to put in the darker values. But as you guys probably saw, like the paper can only hold so much vine charcoal, and it doesn't really get black. So if you see really dark values, don't be afraid to come in and put some compressed charcoal in there, or use your charcoal pencils to get those darker values that you see, okay? And then anything outside of the still life, you can come in with your compressed charcoal and fill that in just to make it look like dark, empty space. But you have to really work it into the paper, and that's where a lot of people are scared to really get their fingers in there. But if you don't want to see the texture, really, unless you like that look, but you have to really kind of get it in the paper so it looks like deep space, okay? If you want it to look like the drawings that I have on the board, okay? But notice how like the edges are kind of fuzzy. So another thing you want to do is, as you start to refine it, you may want to look and see, like, where do you see a highlight and where do you see a shadow? So like on this ball, I can see there's a highlight on the edge. So I could use my little clicky eraser to come along and make like a really nice clean edge. Or, you know, if it was a geometric object that was more angular, I could use like a ruler or a piece of paper to erase along the edge. But I don't want you drawing outlines, because when you draw the outlines, it makes it look flat, right? We talked about that. So I want you to try to purge the lines, and when I walk around and I'm helping you, I'm gonna be like, why is there a line there? And you'll have to see like where there's a shadow that meets a highlight, and decide what to make darker and what to make lighter to make it start to look more three-dimensional, okay? But at any point you're working, you can always just smudge it back in and start over, okay? For highlights, you can use the clicky erasers to get those, but sometimes there's some objects in there that are like really shiny plastic or really shiny glass, and so they may have like these really brilliant highlights on them that you can't really get with the white of the paper. And so for that, at the very end, once I've given you thumbs up, you know, don't do it without my permission, you could use the white chalk. But the mistake a lot of students make is they'll start using it too soon before they're done, and then things are off and it mixes with the charcoal. And when it mixes with the charcoal, it kind of looks like concrete, and it's like a different gray than the gray of the charcoal on your paper. So if you do that, then you have to end up putting this like all over the whole paper, and it looks a little different. It looks more like you painted with like black and white paint instead of charcoal. So if you want that kind of nice warm gray of the charcoal, then don't use this until the very end, because you really don't want to blend this at all, because when it mixes with the charcoal, it makes a cooler gray than the warm gray of the charcoal, okay? So does that make sense? Y'all got it? Now, I'm gonna warn you, when we have the lights down, your drawing is gonna look immaculate, perfectly smooth. You're gonna be like, whoa. But when the lights come on, it looks pretty rough. So today, throughout like maybe every 30 minutes, I may turn the lights on just so you can see it's not as refined. Just like people look better in the dark, so do our drawings, okay? So I will kind of give you a reality check from time to time as we're working today, okay? And so I'm going to turn the lights down. I'm going to give you, well, I'll give you about 5 minutes to start taping your paper, and then I'll be turning down the lights and putting the spotlights on this. But you can sit anywhere you like. You want to be able to see the still life though. And remember how I showed y'all how to take the photo and kind of zoom in. You do that at the beginning once I get the lights turned down, so that at the end of class when we're cleaning up, you're not trying to do that once everybody starts moving around. But you really, the photo is just a backup in case you don't get finished with it, and you can look at it to work later from home, okay? And then this is the same process we're gonna be using for that self-portrait. So you'll be seeing, this won't be the only time we do this. We'll probably do this about 2 or 3 more times throughout the class. So you'll kind of get the hang of it. And I've had students go off to UNT or UTA, and they were like, I was toning my paper in my advanced drawing class, and my professor there was like, what are you doing? And they said their professor had never drawn that way, and that they were amazed, and we're like, where did you learn that? And they were like, North Lake. And so it's good. Like sometimes, you know, we have teachers that don't show us new techniques, and so there are professors out there that can draw awesome, but they taught themselves, and they may not always know these techniques. So there may be some point you can kind of show people this magic as well, okay? So go ahead and start taping your paper.